Welcome to the Emerald City Hockey Podcast. Join RJ and Dylan as they discuss each week's Seattle Kraken news and top stories from around the league.
All right, RJ, we are coming off of arguably the best week of Kraken hockey that we have seen so far. 3 out of 4 wins since we recorded the last podcast, against some great competition, against the Capitals, against the Hurricanes. Winning yesterday for us, back on Saturday for everybody listening to this, Monday moving forward over Florida. Only loss against the back-to-back Stanley Cup champion Tampa Bay Lightning, and the Kraken still looked pretty good in that game, despite the fact that it was 3-0. But in between all of that, sandwiched in there was a holiday. So how was your Thanksgiving?
It was good. I went down to San Jose, so I'm in Sharks territory here to have Thanksgiving with my girlfriend's family, and it was kind of split up between two Thanksgivings with each side of the family, and the second of which being Saturday night, of course. So, as the people who watch ECH Post Game Live know, I wasn't able to make it onto Post Game Live. Was busy stuffing my face with a second Thanksgiving dinner of the week, so very grateful for that.
Yeah, and I definitely know how much you appreciate any opportunity to take part in Thanksgiving food and all that stuff. You talked a little bit about it on one of those post games.
Best holiday of the year.
Yeah. You still had some time to watch that Florida game, and I think, despite all the wins and stuff, the biggest story of this week has to be the fact that Will Borgen was freed. He played in that Florida game. He played well, I thought, anyway. Because you had to miss that post-game live, I would love to hear your thoughts about Will Borgen, and I'm sure everybody else would too.
Yes, after so many free Will Borgen hashtags, Will Borgen was finally freed Saturday night. I saw that, coming in from the warm-ups, the news was on Twitter, and I just exclaimed, they freed Will Borgen! And of course, no one at the Thanksgiving dinner knows what I'm talking about. But that was great news, and I thought he did really well. And I watched him very closely, of course, it being his first game of the season. I really was interested to see how he did, and I was impressed throughout the whole game with how he played. He bodied up on the guys he was supposed to. Unlike maybe a Jeremy Lauzon, he didn't really get lost too much in defensive coverage. He jumped up into the play, which is something that we saw from him in the preseason, knowing that he can bring. There was a really good, I think it was a 4-on-2 rush where he was like the second pass in, and then he passed it again to, was it Schwartz streaking in? But anyway, or McCann, was streaking in. But he was an integral part of that rush. It was a good scoring chance for the Kraken. And I just really like what he brings to this lineup. And with him and Flurry, I mean, you actually have a pretty solid third D pair that, allows you to stack those top 2 D pairs. And you don't have to really worry about the third pair.
Yeah, and you can, they work all 3 levels too. And that's what I think is impressive about it is, I wasn't expecting him to step into the lineup and maybe play as aggressive as he played, coming from Will Borgen. I think my biggest takeaway, kind of reflecting on it, having an extra day now, was just how much fun it looked like he was having. Like, you could tell he was there and he wanted to make as much stuff happen as possible to make the most out of this opportunity to kind of force the coaching staff's hand into keeping him in the lineup for longer, and to get some more regular playing time. But at the same time, it also just looked like he was having fun while doing it. Obviously gets into that scrap after he shot that puck in. I don't know, everybody seemed to be making a little too much about that. I didn't think it was that egregiously beyond the whistle when he shot that puck.
No, and it's tough because it's a quick offside call, and you got to play as if you hold it in, because if you just stop and the play keeps going, that's going to be worse for you. But even after that tussle, like, you could see the smile on his face. He's just enjoying being there, playing in a game, being in the lineup. And he also led the team with 5 blocked shots. I mean, that's huge too. Shot blocking has recently become kind of part of this team's identity. We'll talk about that later, but Borgen just getting in on that a lot in the first game.
Yeah, no, defensively, he was solid. I guess my biggest takeaway from him in the defensive zone, besides the shot blocking that you mentioned, which everybody is getting involved in, was just, unlike the guy he was replacing, Jeremy Lauzon, when under pressure, he made smart decisions with the puck. He wasn't trying to force things if they weren't there. He was just taking the smart outlet pass. He was willing to absorb the hit, right? There was a lot of times he hung in there, made a quick little pass with the puck, a safe pass, absorbed the hit, move forward. Like it was very fundamentally sound in that regard. And it was just someone willing to do what it takes to have the team succeed, right? He's not trying to force something. He's not trying to make something happen really quick. He's not trying to play, beyond his limits that like we've seen Lauzon try to do several times, and generally it'll result in a turnover. We could talk about that when we talk about the Tampa Bay game, but that was really what impressed me. I didn't realize that he could be so kind of poised with the puck. And especially coming off of, sitting on the bench for 20 games, to come into the lineup, make those smart decisions time and time again, and then as well as, pinching up from time to time in smart moments. Just the way he handled everything. He just looked like a really, really smart hockey player. And I think that that's something that they've been missing at times on the back end from guys, as we've seen, obviously Lauzon we've talked about a lot, but we're still kind of in a lot of ways waiting on Vince Dunn to kind of figure things out, right? Vince Dunn has had his share of turnovers, his share of, pinching up at opportunities that really weren't so great to be doing. A lot of the odd man rushes and stuff that we've seen go against the Kraken. Yes, the goalies are heating up and taking care of that, but I think, the defense has to, settle down a little bit in some of those situations. And it seems like Will Borgen is going to be a guy that's going to be on board with that. The other guy coming back into the lineup was Hayden Flurry. Been a hot minute since Hayden Flurry had been in. Thought he played fantastic through the Tampa Bay game, and I thought he played another good game in Florida. And then yes, him and Borgen together, that looked like a really solid pairing. I'm definitely excited to see that moving forward. But we're gonna go ahead. We'll break down kind of each game here because for one reason or another, despite the fact that 3 of these 4 games this last week were wins, I feel like each game was pretty different.
Certainly, they all kind of had a different feel to them. Huh?
Yeah, and certainly the way the Kraken kind of got to the win was different. So I kind of want to go game by game here, and we can just kind of talk about all the different things that worked for the Kraken throughout this week that got them there. Starting with last Sunday, the Washington Capitals game. We recorded last week's podcast before the game. It happened later that night, 5-2 win for the Kraken. And this felt like kind of some of the wins we had seen, before from the Kraken, where, all right, you let in the first goal, you let in that Tom Wilson goal, then you kind of fight back. Things stay kind of close, like maybe a little too close, dominate the second period, get, 3 goals there, and then I don't want to say coast to a victory on the back end because they sort of didn't, but it just felt like that same style of, okay, we're gonna do some stuff, we're gonna come out slow, we're gonna finish kind of even for the first period, then we're gonna dominate the second period, and then we're just gonna kind of be in cruise control for the third period.
Yeah, I mean that's been kind of the script behind some of the earlier wins that we saw, and I mean it was encouraging to see them score another one in that first period after going down 1-0, and I think it had been a few games that they'd allowed the first goal at that point, and certainly in that 6-game losing streak, you got the feeling after the first goal allowed, like, okay, is this happening again? Or are we going to see the same story again? But getting one before the first period was over really helped with that and kind of put them on an even footing to go out and do their thing, which we've seen them do so many times in dominating the second period. And they were finally rewarded for it too. I mean, it was their first lead in a while when they scored that 2-1 goal to take the lead. And that just helps so much when you're not having to play from behind, when you have a lead. And we've seen the Kraken feel a lot more comfortable in those situations.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, that first period goal was a power play goal. Theme of the week was really, the power play has woken up. That hot streak continued on. You could tell Jared McCann just wanted that one too. Really excited to have him back. That was another thing that kind of happened this week for them. I know it feels like so long ago now. But yes, I mean, everything was there. Obviously, you can't keep Ovechkin off the board forever. That happens in the third period. But really, I think the biggest takeaway from that game had to be Grubauer.
Yes, I mean that was Grubauer's get right game, and boy did he need one after that 6 game losing streak, and he just did not look very good in that time, and really all season up until that point. But the team leaned on him heavily in the third period, especially. I mean, he allowed a lot of shots, a lot of good chances. They did a good job keeping him to the outside, but if you have Grubauer the way that he had played earlier in the season, the Caps probably get back into that game. And Grubauer was solid throughout. I mean, he made a great save on Ovechkin on a set play right off the face-off, and that is a hard shot to get your glove on, but he did. Ovechkin was just kind of sitting there on a knee, looking back at Grubauer. He couldn't believe it, and that's the kind of thing that we really hope to see from him, and really have seen since.
Yeah, I mean, in that third period, you allow 23 shots to the Capitals in that third period. That is really not great. It kind of continues the trend we'd seen from them through a lot of these games, unfortunately. But yes, Grubauer stayed strong through that. Stayed strong through a couple odd man rush type situations that we had seen the goalies falter on in the past. Really, both of them. So I still think it's a crime Philip Grubauer wasn't given first star for that game.
I know. Hackstall would agree with you.
Yeah, so I still think that was a crime, but it was really awesome to see because it felt like the first game that we got the Grubauer we thought we were going to get, where he was going to make big saves, keep the team in it, and, the offense could then, have some time to wake up a little and get going, and they did, particularly in that second period. And then continue that moving forward into the Wednesday game against Carolina. Totally different game. This was the first kind of grinded out performance we'd seen from the Kraken. First low scoring, physical, tough game just kind of we'd seen from them in general. But once again, I think the main takeaway had to be Philip Grubauer.
Yep. And it looked at first like that wasn't like that might not be the case, with the early goal allowed, but man, did he get solid after that. And yeah, I mean, it really was one of those games that we thought we'd see a lot more of at the start of the season, where, the Kraken just have to grind out a game against a very good team, keep them to the outside, and rely on their goaltending to be the difference.
Yeah, and, it was the first time that I felt like the Kraken were obviously the more physical team in a way that mattered. Like, we'd seen the Kraken dominate in just, hits before, but not like in a way where it felt like it was actually contributing to this idea of grinding the other team down, stalling them out as they try to, enter the offensive zone. There was a little more dump and chase in this game. Maybe we weren't also thrilled to see that from them, but it certainly gave you maybe a glimpse at what this team would look like in a playoff series. And I think it is definitely a recipe that could work in a situation like that. Now, I know that's a long way out, have to get there, and that's going to be a challenge. But I just felt like this was a physical effort, just top down. Alexiak started to get more physical this week. I think that's one of the top stories for this team, and I think that started in this game. Him using his big body and throwing around his size, taking advantage of what that allows him to do. So I was happy to see the physical effort from the team. Happy to see Grubauer stay hot. It was obvious now that, like, okay, Grubauer's back. He is here. That is awesome to see. And you just know, regardless of what's going on, obviously Kraken outshot 36-22 in this game, but Grubauer's playing that way. The Kraken are going to be in it every single night, and that's something I think we haven't, had that confidence in a while. But yeah, that one, it was just a totally different game. Like to see that the Kraken can hang with a really good team, maybe slow the game down. I mean, that's kind of the way Carolina wants to play anyway. It's not like the Kraken did this to try to, take out this top team like you might see normally, but it was good to see that they could hang with a top team and that they could hang in a low-scoring physical affair. Then, over the holiday, fly cross-country, go into Tampa, and, they lost 3-0 RJ, but it wasn't all bad.
No, it really wasn't. And, the Kraken did as good of a job as I, could have expected them to do in the circumstances. They kept the game close for a long time, and it's just so hard to penetrate, that defensive wall that Tampa has standing up at their own blue line and then kind of slowly pushing forward, and really, getting a lot of the possession. I mean, they look just like they did, winning the two consecutive Stanley Cups that they did. It's just a very good team, and the Kraken didn't let it fall apart either, which is something earlier in the season. You could look at a game like that and maybe it ends up 6-0, 5-0, 6-0 even, given all the chances there. But they hung in it and they gave themselves chances to counterattack, and yeah, they didn't go in, but it's one of those where you can't feel too bad about the performance.
Yeah, I mean, this could have easily turned into like that Colorado game where it's just over, halfway through. This felt like the Kraken were in it really through the whole thing. Kind of dominated possession-wise. They got dominated. They didn't dominate, that's for sure. Yeah, kind of takeaways as far as what the team needs to improve on. Grubauer kind of let in a soft one at the beginning, but then he kind of shut things down from there on out. Both the later two goals were not on him. And so it was good to see that, he was able to recompose himself and get back to the Grubauer that we had seen the previous two games. So, kind of keep the confidence in Grubauer moving forward. That was big. Kraken have to figure out a way to deal with teams that have aggressive defensemen. And I know not every team has defensemen at the level that Tampa has defensemen at, and that they don't play where they're going to challenge you every time you're trying to enter the zone. But we knew that zone entries, going from the neutral zone into the Kraken's offensive zone there has been a struggle for this team all season long. They really worked on their transition game as far as getting out of their own zone, but they'd struggled as far as getting into the offensive zone and maybe establishing a presence there, controlling the clock there in the offensive zone. And that was, I think, really ultimately why they weren't able to get one on the board in this game. Obviously, Vasilevsky's a fantastic goaltender that, didn't help them either. But it seemed like they couldn't get anything going. They couldn't enter the zone and do anything really at all. They had to be entering with numbers if they were going to have any sort of sustained pressure. And then on the back end, Tampa, they just kind of kept things to the perimeter, and the Kraken couldn't deal with that. They had no answers for it, so they would just kind of die in their zone, and then every time you're finally clearing it, everybody's going to go on a line change. Tampa just collects the puck, and you're right back in your own zone. So which do you think is a bigger problem from that game, or something that the Kraken need to focus on more? Is it continuing to focus on working on offensive zone entries, or do you think it's a bigger problem that if teams are willing to be patient in the Kraken's defensive zone, they have to work on maybe being a little bit more aggressive as far as trying to force a turnover so that they're not, having all their shifts, be 100% in their own zone?
I think the offensive zone entries should probably be more of a priority, because that's something that teams can do against you, by stacking the blue line. And, it's the Lightning are very, very good at it, but it's something that other teams can do as well. And it's a lot tougher to do things when you don't have an answer for it, because you need to be able to have some offensive zone time to generate something offensively. In the D zone, I think the Kraken, you can get away with a lot of bend and don't break defense, keep the outside, even if it does tire you out, even if you do have to get a change when you dump the puck out. Eventually, you'll get possession early enough in a shift, and then if you can go create some things offensively, you can put the other team back in that situation. Whereas if you just can't get anything going, getting into the offensive zone, there's really nothing you can do about it. And the reason I think that that's a higher priority is because you look at the next game. I don't want to get too far ahead, but you look at the next game against Florida, and there were a lot of those shifts where the Panthers kind of kept possession in the offensive zone, worked the Kraken around, and yeah, it was a long shift for Seattle, but ultimately it felt like they were in control and they were able to get things going the other way offensively, and they won the game.
Yeah, exactly. And just the fact that, offensive zone entries has been something that this Kraken team has struggled with all season long. Like, I don't know that there's been a game where I've looked at it and just been like, oh, okay, here we go. We've got the answer. It still doesn't look like there's really a system in place for where guys are supposed to go, where guys are supposed to be. It still very, feels very much fluid every time they're going into the offensive zone. Love to see something a little more structured. Yeah, I definitely think that's probably the bigger takeaway there. Otherwise, as far as the bend don't break defense, we saw that both goals came really off of turnovers. They weren't so much because Tampa was able just to, hang around and just spend a bunch of time in the zone. There was plenty of times where Tampa would have like a minute's worth of zone time in the offensive zone for them, and the Kraken didn't allow a shot.
Yep.
Like that,
I mean, they kept him to the outside pretty darn consistently.
yeah.
And it's a Tampa team that has good guys that are good at getting to the inside and penetrating. Pat Maroon and Corey Perry, we saw a lot, kind of in front of the net, but they just didn't really have any second chances, any rebound opportunities. And Grubauer is a big part of that as well with his rebound control. But they did a good job of keeping everything to the outside.
Well, and they did an excellent job. The last thing for this game I was going to bring up was the defensemen did such an amazing job at keeping guys like Perry and Maroon from really actually being able to set up. Forget about the rebounds being there and getting second chances. Grubauer, in part, wasn't letting any rebounds because he could see everything. They made it so that Grubauer, despite the fact that, all these shots are being taken from the point, Hayden Flurry did an amazing job of constantly clearing guys out of the way. Adam Larson continuing to do that as well. Grubauer had as much vision as you could ever hope for 5-on-5 where the other team is, taking shots from the point. The fact that he was able to see it really the whole way a lot of times, just because the Kraken really made an effort to, the defenseman get side by side with the guy you're covering against and just lean on him, get him out of the way, make it so that, your goalie can see something, and it makes all the difference. Because, then even on like the low shots, the pad shots, as you said, Grubauer can then exercise some rebound control. He's not just trying to fight it off because he's seeing it last second. He's seeing it the whole way in. He can maybe catch it, not give up a rebound at all, or he can then really take his time and set up properly so that he can control where that rebound's going. And I think a lot of that credit goes to the defense there. They just did a fantastic job with that. And really, that is something that carried over into the Florida game as well, as we transition to that one. Really, the only time Florida got anything going was the one time they were able to get somebody in front of Chris Drieger, and it became a problem.
Exactly. I mean, and that was that first goal with Patrick Hornqvist, kind of able to set up pretty freely in front, got a tip, and, that makes a shot very, very difficult to stop. And you have that first Panthers goal. But from then on, they really weren't able to get anything consistently in front of the net. And you could kind of see with Patrick Hornqvist, someone who Dylan, is a Penguins fan in the past, is no stranger to the front of the net, and he's always trying to get to those areas. And he did it successfully early in the game, and it seemed like he was kind of stymied and frustrated trying to get there again after that happened. And you got to give a lot of credit to the Kraken's defense for that. Looking at the advanced stats from that game, as I was checking in, kind of looking on Natural Stat Trick, seeing the the expected goals for percentage, the scoring shots, the Panthers were up in the 60-70% range as far as these chances went. But looking at the eye test, just watching the game, it felt like at every moment the Kraken were in control in their own D zone, despite spending a lot of time there, and with the Panthers having a lot of possession.
Yeah, for sure. And, I spent a little bit of time talking about Patrick Hornqvist on the post-game live and talking about that goal. Yeah, because that is his bread and butter. That is why teams want him. That's why he's been able to carve out a really nice career for himself, has been, getting in front of goalies, screening them. He's so good at it, so good at those tip-ins, so good at knocking in rebounds there in tight. And, talking about really he was allowed to set up there because Vince Dunn didn't do what, really all the other defensemen had been doing through those last two games, which was Vince Dunn just settled in behind him and was just kind of giving him little taps on the back, like, hey, don't be here. No. And it's like, you can't do that. You gotta go side by side with him and just lean on him, force him out of the way. You don't need to do it a ton. You don't need to like take a penalty for, holding or interference or anything crazy, but you do have to get alongside him, because if you're going to, you just can't position yourself behind them, because one, then you're part of the problem screening your own goalie, for one, that you don't want to do. And then your only answer is to cross-check him. That's the only way you can get rid of him. And you could see Vince Dunn was doing that. He was kind of giving like little cross-checks, nothing that was going to draw a penalty, because he knew he couldn't fully cross-check him. But Vince Dunn had the opportunity when he first engaged with Hornqvist to do it from the side and really just move Hornqvist out of the way. If that happens, Drieger sees that shot all the way in. He's going to make a save, and that goal doesn't happen. So, a little learning moment there for Vince Dunn. Obviously, he's not totally known for his defensive play, but it does show what a difference the defenseman kind of making an effort those last couple games makes on, those kinds of situations net front. The other big takeaway, as I've mentioned his name a couple times already, Chris Drieger joining Grubauer in this whole like hot goalie, we've got somebody, and they're playing the way we thought they would all along.
Yes, Chris Drieger finally feels like he's arrived. It's been a tough start to the season for him, not looking too good in the preseason, and of course having that injury in his very first game where he comes in relief of Grubauer in the third period. He goes on IR, comes back, doesn't look quite 100%, and that's something that Dave Haxtell did hint at, as recently as the game before the Florida game that Drieger played in Colorado, where this is kind of the first time I felt like we've actually had 200% healthy goalies, despite Drieger having played in Vegas after coming off IR. Clearly wasn't 100% then, as we now know, but it looks like that knee has finally gotten right for him. And I mean, he showed what he's capable of. This is the goalie that he looked like in Florida last season, and the reason the Kraken, signed him really to be their starter before Grubauer came along, and no one thought he'd be available. But I mean, Drieger looked fantastic. He was calm. His angles were right this time. He took the right angle. And it's just fun to watch him also. He's just so stylistically different from Philip Grubauer, and they're both great goalies. But just to see the contrast in their styles is something interesting, especially, with some of the glove saves from Drieger that just look a little different than what you'll get from Grubauer.
Yeah, I mean, that was literally the next thing I was going to bring up was talking, let's kind of break down their different styles, because I do feel like throughout the NHL, there is two styles of goaltenders. There is the aggressive goaltenders that are going to challenge shooters a lot, that might get them, out of position from time to time a little bit, maybe struggle with cross-ice passes, that kind of stuff. And those are the goalies that look like they, for lack of a better term, kind of flop around a little bit. Right. And if you've watched any amount of hockey, you kind of know what I'm talking about. Their limbs are a little more limber and they're kind of all over the place. Still gets the job done. I'm not trying to discredit that at all. And that's very much Drieger, right? Like the first thing that stood out to me yesterday was just how aggressive he was. He was coming out and challenging shots. Again, defense did a good job through, basically all of the game, all with the exception of the one goal, of giving him line of sight. So whenever the Panthers were trying to take a point shot, he was way up at the edge of his crease. A couple times he was out of his crease. He was just totally challenging those point shots because he could see it the whole way. He was using his glove, and that was really awesome to see. Very much in contrast with Philip Grubauer, which seems to go to the other goaltending school of, I'm going to be technically sound, I'm just going to be in the right position, and I'm just going to be big, and the puck's going to hit me. Right? Like that's a little bit more of what Philip Grubauer plays like. Both styles work. I was talking a little bit yesterday about how you can have both styles like that, and yet you can have goalies go through hot and cold streaks doing both of them. You'd think the other would be a little bit more consistent, but it's not, as we saw from Grubauer this season. But it is just kind of fun to watch the contrasting styles between these two guys. I know those are kind of really easy non-technical ways of explaining anything. Do you want to explain kind of maybe more on the technical side the differences there?
I mean, I'm not a goaltending expert. It's hard to go really into detail. I'm not a goalie coach. But yeah, as far as like you look at Grubauer, and as you were just talking about, get in the right spot, have the puck hit you. There's like certain, again, it's all about angles of attack. There's a lot of geometry to it, basically, where how far you come out of the net. You also have a fraction of a second, longer to see shots the further back you are in net. Also, as far as being aggressive, trying to locate pucks, like on shots from the point. We saw a lot of shots from the point kind of go in on Grubauer, where there's a lot of traffic in front, where it can be difficult to locate things. Whereas Drieger is someone, especially with his height, he can kind of get out there and really be more aggressive about trying to get his head in the right position to locate a puck, whether it's seeing over somebody or kind of reaching around, to see around somebody. That's something where, it can also put you out of position sometimes, as we've seen with Drieger, being aggressive to try and look around somebody. But other times you can maybe see pucks that a goalie like Grubauer just wouldn't really have a chance to see. So, there's trade-offs. It's all about trade-offs with each style of goaltending, but it's cool to see both of them on the same team, and hopefully we get a little bit more of a rotation. I know that's what, we were all kind of planning on from the start of the season, so we can really see them, just almost alternating, just look at the differences. And that's something we can talk about a lot more as the season goes on, we get more tape on Drieger. We see certain saves are like, all right, this is how he would treat it differently than what Grubauer would do.
Yeah, I mean, interesting you bring up tape. That was one of the things I was going to bring up next. I promise we didn't actually plan this. I know maybe better podcasts would, but
you just got that chemistry, Dylan. It's natural.
We do. It's all these years of talking hockey between the two of us. Yeah, one last thing on that is I will say it will be fun kind of moving forward, the fact that, opposing teams, until Hackstall announces really which goaltender is going to start opposing teams, it's a different plan of attack for both of those styles. So having both of those guys moving forward, having confidence and trust in both of those guys moving forward will kind of, bring another game within a game element to the Kraken, as far as other teams maybe having to adjust what they want to be doing based on what goaltender they have to face. But coming back around to the idea of watching tape, one of the things that was talked about a lot yesterday during that post-game live was, it felt like the Kraken had watched a lot of tape of themselves, watched a lot of tape of Florida, and they really started to make adjustments. And I think, as we talked about that Capitals game, it looked like a Kraken game that we were used to seeing as far as game flow and everything. It's just that it finally worked out for them rather than going the other way. The Carolina game, that's just a classic old school gutsy performance, grind it out, get the W, move on. But that Florida Panthers game, that looked like a different Kraken team to me. It looked like a team that has, worked on correcting the flaws in their game, plugging the holes, and then also worked on, okay, what's been working for us? How can we do that more?
Absolutely. And certain things also, watching film on Florida, watching, okay, where can this team beat us? And where are we going to be okay? If we keep them to the outside and prevent these certain type of shots, prevent getting to the middle, we're going to be all right, because that's where they can beat you. In transition, that's where they can beat you. And we want to generally limit that sort of thing. And also, they actually shot from the point and got a goal on a tip. I mean, that was their first one of the season, according to the NHL shot data. Things like that where, okay, we're going to look at, here's a way we could kind of vary our attack. And it's something the Panthers gave up a lot of. I mean, they gave up a lot of room at the points, and the Kraken were using that more often. And that's a hint that they watched the film and know that's going to be there.
Right. I mean, that's kind of Florida's MO. That's something you and I talked about the previous night, right? Kind of looking, after that Tampa game, we were looking ahead to the Florida game. And what was one of the things I said? Contrasting Tampa, Florida plays passive and conservative with their defensemen. They want to just kind of shelter in and kind of do that defensive shell that we all hated when the Kraken tried earlier in this season. That's how Florida does it. They let their forwards be aggressive, let them pressure guys, let them kind of drive the attack in the transition game, and our defensemen are going to hang back. And it looked like the Kraken took that to heart. They watched tape on Florida. Either that or they just listened to us. That'd be cool too. But they
don't know that they didn't listen to us.
I was going to say, there's been quite a bit of coincidences after we bring some stuff up from time to time.
Evidence is mounting, Dylan.
It is. But yes, it looked like the Kraken knew what was going on there. They knew that they were going to have to take more shots from the point. We saw a lot of shots from the point. All the defensemen got involved in it too. It wasn't just like, oh, okay, Vince Dunn's going to shoot more from the point, or Hayden Flurry's going to do it. Like guys we'd already seen. Larson was taking shots. Alexiak taking shots, obviously, on that one that was tipped in. Yeah. Trust me, we'll get to that empty net goal. So yes, it definitely looked like they understood the team they were playing against, and it felt like, again, that it's kind of been the first time they've been able to do that, where it was like they entered the game with a game plan and they could execute it, and it worked. It wasn't just like, oh, let's just try to focus on starting better, because we've been really bad at that, right? Like through that last bit of home games, really before this week, it was just like, okay, forget about like trying to game plan for the other team. We just have to like not suck.
Exactly. I mean, that's like first things first. It really did feel like that was kind of the priority. But it's nice when you can actually move past that and start to really watch film and game plan for a team.
Yeah, and then obviously Drieger making the save on Huberdeau's breakaway. Huberdeau did his move, Move I've
Yes.
seen many times. Drieger knew it was there. It still beat him 5-hole, but he knew to bring that right leg back across and keep it out.
And I am so glad you brought that up because, I mean, that was the save of the game. As many saves as he made late, that was the most important save of the game. And I really think if that goes in, it's a totally different game because you have to remember the situation too. It's early. It's, less than 2 minutes into the game. The Kraken are on the power play, by the way. That was a shorthanded breakaway. Yep. I mean, that is an absolute killer if you give that one up. And also, the Kraken went right back the other way and scored to take the 1-0 lead. It is a totally different game. It's, in some ways like a 2-goal swing there. If that goes in and Drieger was up to the task and he did just kind of catch it with the leg coming back, but he looked calm the whole time.
Yeah. And it did have some elements to, watching it. And I think the Panthers broadcasters even in some ways like said it as he was coming in on the breakaway, like, okay, is he gonna do his backhanded move? Like it is just one of the things he does. And obviously Drieger, maybe some experience seeing it, last year while he was in Florida.
Yeah, he would know of all players.
Yeah, and it was one of those, like he was like, okay, you gonna do this? Huberdeau was like, yes, I'm gonna do this. Made the save. Like I said, still got it beat initially. It is a good move, right? We all know it's coming. He still is successful with it.
Always
Speaks
one of my
to his
favorites
ability.
to try if I'm on a breakaway. That's for sure.
Yeah, but yes, huge save. We'll say just as a weird caveat because I was watching football earlier today. We record on Sunday. Jonathan Huberdeau, front row at the Miami Dolphins game today. Just happened to see him. It was just funny. I was like, hey, wait a second. What are you doing here?
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, that was a huge save. It looked like they were watching tape there. But like I said, it looks like the Kraken have, they've studied what they've been successful at. They're trying to recreate that in the offensive zone, seeing less of that triangle offense, both in the Tampa and Florida games. Really appreciated that. Working more kind of behind their net. Behind the other team's net, having somebody back there. I love having Ryan Donato back in the lineup. He is so good operating in tight around the opposing team's net. And it's just something that there really isn't another member of the Kraken that is, kind of as well versed in doing that. Like having him there, they, that seemed to be more of a focus for them, getting scoring chances from players, and it seemed like everybody whiffed on them, from Donskoy to Appleton, to everybody who tried to do these kind of quick one-time shots from kind of in close. I don't know, it's loosely from the dot, but you're in closer than the face-off dot, kind of on the edge of the face-off circle there. They tried that several times. Everybody whiffed on them, but at the same time, it still looked like a good play that could have success if they can figure that one out. But yeah, passes were cleaner. That,
yes.
it was a week of checking boxes of all the things that scared us and made us nervous and gave the Kraken problems. It was just a week of checking all those boxes and saying, hey, we worked on that. We worked on passing. We're not throwing it into each other's skates all the time. And we worked on, I guess they didn't work on zone entries quite yet, but they worked on how to play better defensively. Defensemen handing off coverages in their own zone. The defenseman.
Yes, that's huge. And it's one of those underrated things that's, not always easy to see when you're watching the game. But that's where a lot of the miscommunications, a lot of the defensive breakdowns happen, is when guys had to hand off coverages, the two defensemen, and they did so much better at that.
Yeah, I mean, how many times were you and I bringing up in post games? Okay, on this goal, what happened was somehow both Kraken defensemen were behind their own goal line, right? Like they're both stuck behind their own net. Like you just can't have that stuff happen. Other teams will score on that every single time, regardless of the team. NHL players are just too good to get away with doing that. But this time, defensemen were doing great as far as handing off coverages, as one would stick with the puck carrier or they'd pass him on, but the other defenseman always knew what was going on and knew where to adjust and cover. To already talked about the defensemen all doing a good job of giving goalies sight lanes through that Tampa and Florida game, making sure both goalies could see the puck at all times. Just all the little stuff was being done right by the Kraken this week, and I just hope that we continue to see that moving forward. But I think we will, and so this kind of begs the question, RJ, how much of this is just okay, the coaching staff maybe addressing things finally, or is it just players are finally settling into being members of the Kraken, settling into Seattle, and they're just getting comfortable with each other. And this is really that chemistry that we've been talking about all year needing to form. Everyone was talking offensively, right? You got to get like your wingers on the same page with your center to make stuff happen up there. Defensive pairings need that too.
They do. And I think, Florida game aside, because with Gio and all this stuff, and Borgen coming in, but you finally had a little bit of consistency on the D pairs, and I think that went a long way as far as the communication, as we mentioned, the handing off of coverage, and also finding at forward some line combinations that worked. Moving Jaden Schwartz down with Yanni Gord. I mean, that's something that we weren't really sure what to think about that at first, but I mean, it worked really well, and just finding certain things that click and then sticking with them, when you can. It's tough with with like Appleton coming back, which, and then, with like Blackwell out last game, and then you've got Yarncroke injured. So you have to make some changes around the edges where you can. But I think finally finding some of that chemistry that's working is important. And then also, just putting those things together that they've worked on in practice. Sometimes it just takes a little time to finally take. And also sometimes I think you need to be playing against an opponent where you need to be doing all those things in order to have a chance, because against something like a Chicago, if you look, on the homestand earlier, where like you can probably get away with it if you're not doing some of those things right. But, you don't have that pressure, that mental focus where you need to be doing all of them right. Whereas against these top teams, if you're not handing off coverage as well, if you're not making crisp passes, if you're not doing all the things you need to do, you're going to get embarrassed. And I think the Kraken knew that, and they rose to the occasion.
Yeah, and we talked about it on the post-game live yesterday after the Florida game. That Colorado game being their rock bottom, their wake-up moment, the Tanev snapping his stick at the end of the period kind of being the thing. Like, since then, this team has looked different. And it does feel like that, they finally got to that point where they were like, okay, yes, backs against the wall. We have to prove that, we don't suck. It's not that we're all just bad at hockey. It's, we gotta turn things around if we don't want this season just to turn into this, looking like an expansion team from the 90s where we win 15 games.
And sometimes, I mean, that hangs over you. You look at that Avs game and, this is what it's going to be for a couple weeks if we don't turn this around. The schedule's not getting any easier. And, they were sick of losing. I think it was Yarncroke that just said, we're sick of losing. That's what caused turn. We're just sick of losing. We want to remember how the win feels. It was just clearly something very important to them.
Yeah. So kind of one of the, last things I want to touch on, and you brought it up a little bit there, is the forward groups, because we have seen some different looks, and I do want to kind of talk about those as guys are kind of rotating in and out of the lineup. Because I think some of the guys that have looked really good and that I've liked seeing in the lineup, not necessarily the guys I thought preseason were going to be, kind of key players. So one of the big things that they've done is they've moved Morgan Geekie out of the center spot. He's playing more on the wing, and I do like that, because I think Geekie's got the skill to be in the lineup every night, but he was struggling at center for a little while as far as like defensive protections and coverages go, stuff like that. So I like him being able just to focus on doing what he does well, not have to be in his head too much. But like in that, in one game that meant Colin Blackwell is starting at center now. And then he was scratched in the Florida game after that Tampa game. Riley Shahan's back up into the lineup, hanging onto that fourth line center spot. Saw Donato come back in with Yarncroke getting hurt. See Mason Appleton come back because he's now no longer hurt. So I just kind of want to get, let's kind of just go player by player here. Too many players for the amount of spots on the ice, obviously. Yes. But so let's kind of try to figure out who we like and kind of who's been playing well and who we think kind of fits the team, because somebody like Colin Blackwell, who I was really, really excited to see in this lineup, is still struggling to maybe find a spot for him.
Yeah, and I think, it kind of came to a head in this Florida game where you look at the kind of game you're going to get into, where you're going to have to play a lot of bend but don't break defense. You're going to need someone who's, and not that Blackwell isn't defensively responsible, but I mean, like Riley Sheahan, he knows that's his job. And this season, he's been very good at it too. As that fourth line center, shut the other team down and just know that while you're out there, they're not going to score. And, there was a lot of that from him. And it seemed like he was kind of the better matchup for that Florida game. And you go back to watching film and, seeing what you need. I think that was, an interesting wrinkle that they threw in there, probably knowing what the matchup was going to be. So yeah, Blackwell, I still think there's got to be a spot for him in the lineup, mostly because he can play anywhere. I mean, after these last few games, I hate to say it because Appleton's just still kind of coming back, but maybe put him in for Appleton, on that right wing spot, with Wenberg and Johansson. But yeah, I mean, what do you think? Like, we've talked about Blackwell. You see what you think of that, but versus Mason Appleton, what do you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a couple things there that I want to bring up. The idea of versatility and then Appleton, because I thought Appleton played a really good game in that Florida game. I was really impressed with what I saw there from him. He did a good job. He was in good spots offensively. I thought he was doing a good job of, kind of playing his game. He was kind of back to that as far as, okay, what position is he? He's all over the place kind of thing. Yeah. But he does a really good job of staying in passing lanes for the other team. Like he is a really good job as far as he takes away what the other team wants to be doing without actually doing anything. In a way, like he's putting himself in the right spot. He's not picking off pucks. He's not like intercepting passes. He's not shot blocking all the time. But if you look at where he is positionally through other teams' transition games and stuff, because he's got those wheels, he can get in lanes, and he does actually stall other teams out with his kind of erratic, like, I'm just kind of going where the puck is. He does that, but he does pressure other teams, and he takes away what they want to do. And it's just weird because it's, there's no stat you can point to and say, okay, he's making a difference. And it's one of those things, unless you're absolutely watching him, you're not going to see it either. But I do like having Appleton back in the role that they've put him in these last couple of games. I think he's starting to feel it, and I think he is starting to be the player that we want to see. That, and as the Kraken are trying to get a little more net front heavy, play around the net in the offensive zone, you and I both know he likes to do that. He likes to drive the net. He's very comfortable in those positions. So in that sense, I want to see Appleton hang around. And, Blackwell, he's someone, when I think about what he was for the Rangers, he was just kind of like this weird offensive, spark plug. Like, he would just kind of kick off their offense for them, but he wasn't necessarily going to be the guy that was going to finish off the play or, make the insane pass and all that stuff. He was going to do the gutsy thing that was going to get it out of your zone, get it into the other zone, kind of throw it on the net, get the offense going, maybe get the defense off their game a little bit, onto their heels maybe. He just hasn't really done that for the Kraken so far this year.
No, and I think part of that might also just be the situations that he's been put into. He hasn't had a whole lot of ice time and not a lot with, the most quality line mates, because that was the thing. He would also play in the top six, fairly often with the Rangers when they needed someone to plug in one of those spots. He hasn't really done that yet with the Kraken. I'd still want to see him on the second power play unit. I mean, as well as the power play's doing, you don't need to change up a whole lot of that. But eventually, if something runs cold or you just need a guy in that bumper spot, I want to see what he can do there. But yeah, I mean, it's tough right now because he's still trying to get into the swing of things. But I'm not against scratching him there like they did for the Panthers game. And, sometimes it can help just to, have a game to watch after getting back into it a little bit. But I do want to see him, back into lineup when they can get him there.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. He is not suited to the role that they've kind of forced him into. I think he could do maybe some stuff on McCann's wing. I think maybe there could be something there. Again. McCann, they've kind of left him alone in a sense. He's just going to be the offense for his line right now. That kind of seems the way they're going about it. And, he's playing so well, he can, they can get away with that.
Or if for some reason you want to move Geeky off that line, whether it's back to center or something else, maybe Blackwell's the guy you can put there.
Yeah.
But also one more thing is with Blackwell, I think he's one of those guys who's a lot more valuable when you're dealing with injury trouble than when the team is fully healthy like they are now. Where when everyone's healthy, it's kind of hard to find a spot for him because he gets bumped down the lineup. But if you start to have injuries pile up, maybe 2 or 3 forwards hurt, and all of a sudden there's a top 6 spot you need filled, whether it's him or moving someone else up, he can kind of go in those different places that can help you deal with that a little bit better. So right now he's not going to be as valuable as maybe if you have some more forward injuries.
Yeah, and so that kind of gets to the other point that I wanted to make with Blackwell, and I'm going to go ahead and bring Calle Yarncroke into this because they were both two players we were really excited about going into this preseason, going through the whole preseason, off season, all that stuff, because of their versatility, because of this idea that they can play top six, bottom six, they can play either wing, they can play center if you need them to, they could play power play, PK, they can do it all. But at the same time, it feels like both of them have struggled a lot with the Kraken. Yarncroke's had a lot of decent games, not really showing up on the box scores after any of them though. And so I do think that it kind of begs the question with Blackwell, with Yarncroke, given the way this team is set up, given how deep this team is, right, having the depth that maybe other NHL teams don't have, is there really a full-time role for either of them? Or are they kind of more, as you said, fill-ins? Because right now it feels like, they're kind of expendable for guys like Ryan Donato or Mason Appleton, who when they're on their games, they're really fulfilling one job and they're excelling at it. So it's one of those, do you want to have the jack of all trade, master of none, or do you want to have the one piece that you plug in to do one thing, but they're going to be like a top 5 guy at doing that?
Yeah, and it can be matchup based as well, and that's something you have to take into account. And you've got these different options. With Blackwell, I'd say that's probably the case where maybe is it a rotation with a guy like Donato. For Yarncroke, it's tough because when he's not scoring, that's kind of the spot he's in too. He's very solid defensively, but at the end of the day, you've got to be producing a little bit more offensively. And I know he had 2 points, in that game before getting hurt. So that's kind of more what you'd like to see from him going forward. And, it's tough now. He's injured. He didn't even go on the road trip. So figure it, might be kind of bad. So you don't know when we'll see him next. But yeah, if the scoring doesn't materialize, he's kind of put himself in that spot too. Although just given how the coaching staff is, and he's a guy I could see them really wanting to play and leaning toward finding a spot for in the lineup, even if he's not scoring as much as he needs to be, just because he's so defensively responsible. Coaches tend to like that. So, I mean, that's kind of how I could see it playing out, maybe in favor of a guy like Ryan Donato, where coaches just seem to go against someone like that a little bit more.
Yeah, and it is a shame because I do feel like the Kraken are better when Ryan Donato's out there. Like, I never thought in a thousand years I'd be saying that, but he does seem to make a visual difference when watching them, particularly on offense. But yeah, I mean, it is really unfortunate. Calle Yarncroke's been, I've been a big fan of his for a really, really long time. But yes, the situations that he was excelling in Nashville just kind of don't really exist for him here. The fact that they could rotate him in and kind of, he would be like a top 6 center for them at times in Nashville, and how they would use him on their power play when, helped him out a lot there as far as getting on the score sheet. Whereas here, yeah, he's kind of being asked to be defensively responsible, kind of hang out, be the solid defensive guy on a line that can, hang with offensively capable and minded guys, but be that guy who's going to make sure things don't get too bad if things go the other way on him, right? And I just don't feel like that's, while he can do that, I just don't think that's where you're going to, get the most out of him, so to speak. Kind of similar to what they've been doing with Donskoy, although they kind of asked Donskoy to try to create more offense, and it's just not for himself. But yeah, it is going to be something interesting, and worth monitoring as we move forward. Obviously right now with Yarncroke out injured, it kind of answers itself, but I would like to see, maybe you try sticking Blackwell in a top 6 role where Yarncroke was and see how things work out. But I feel like Marcus Johansson has played so well. He's bringing a lot to the table. Again, someone I had questions about. He answered all my questions and then some. I think he's got to stay a regular and operate on special teams and all that stuff. Donskoy's been playing really consistent really throughout the season. Want to see him stay in the lineup. It's just one of those things. Didn't think we'd see it. Those guys like Blackwell and Yarncroke seemed like these great luxuries to have, all that stuff. But for one reason or another, that's just how it goes sometimes when you're building out a team. But yes, we'll see how things go. I guess we'll finish off. Obviously, Gio's been out, captain's been out. COVID protocol.
Yep. I mean, that's tough to see, but thankfully no one else has joined him.
Yeah,
concern usually when you have one guy go on COVID protocol. Usually there's some others that follow, but thankfully that hasn't happened to this point.
Yeah, that's been really interesting to see. And then I was gonna say, like, is it bad that it doesn't look like the Kraken have really missed him?
You know what? I think you're right. I mean, they haven't looked a whole lot worse on defense. I mean, in some cases even just improved, some of the other guys. Yeah, I think it might even be good in a weird way that he's just getting some rest, just given kind of his age and where he's at. Obviously, that's not the way you want to get it. But, it might be good to just kind of have him out of the lineup for a few games, just have him hopefully rested, hopefully feeling okay coming back. But, if this is what it took also to maybe see a guy like Will Borgen and see what he can bring, then that can be a good thing as well. I think, it's kind of there's some silver linings to it, at least with guys stepping up.
Right. And it also makes you think that maybe you can get by without him. Obviously, can't be too much in the cards long term, just given his age and everything. We all know his contract's up at the end of the year. But we'd also heard rumors, of the Kraken, or at least of other teams being interested, maybe trading for him. Maybe this stretch, that doesn't look like it would totally derail things for the Kraken, like you might have thought earlier in the season. So it is something worth monitoring. It's just, I thought I'd bring it up because I did like the kind of pace that the defense was able to play with these last couple games, and maybe some of the offensive chances that guys were taking that normally wouldn't, because Gio is there to fill that role. So just something I thought I'd bring up. But otherwise, I think that's going to do it for us. Couple things to bring up. If you haven't been part of the last couple live streams and stuff, we've added several new designs to the merch store. You can get there by going to emeraldcityhockey.com. It's one of the things right up there. One of the tabs you can click on.
Store tab up in the far right.
Yep. If you're watching this podcast on YouTube at all, the link is in the description down below. It's kind of at the bottom, so you guys scroll down a little bit. But the link that'll take you right to the store is there. You can click on that, go check out the new designs. Thank you to everybody who has been purchasing those. We've had a ton of sales of those these last couple of days, and that's been absolutely awesome to see. And the other thing I want to bring up is, Patreon is coming. Just going to be in a couple days from now, launching December 1st. So just a reminder, that we'll definitely be doing a social media blitz when that happens. So if you follow us anywhere, you should be able to see that and be able to join if you choose to. But I did want to bring that up one last time before it gets going. But I think that's it as far as things go, right, RJ?
Yep, I think that's it. It's been a good week.
Yeah, really awesome week. Want to see more of these. Looking ahead to the schedule at hand, we've got Buffalo Monday night. That's a 4:00 start. Detroit on Wednesday. That's a 4:30 start. Kind of a little fun there. And then Edmonton back at home on Friday. That's going to be a good game to see. Obviously, did well against McDavid. Not so much against Draisaitl last time, and that came back to bite us pretty hard. But it should be a good.
Kraken are a different team now.
I was going to say
a different team now, and I'm interested to see how they match up.
Yep, it should be a good test for them. So definitely excited to see that. But don't want to sleep on Buffalo or Detroit. They have been surprising a lot of teams this year. So got to get through those games first. Should be good. Thanks everybody for joining us once again, and we will see you all next time.